All right, Brain Spring Podcast. I'm here with my friend Jared Pickard. How you doing, man?
Excellent.
It's a great jacket, I have to say.
Thank you.
It's very Joseph in his Technicolor dream coat.
Actually, it's Jay Koss is the gentleman's name who made it.
Oh, really?
No, I was just kidding.
Well, there we go.
About the Joseph part, but yeah. Shout out to Jay Koss.
So I met Jared through our men's group, which I talk about a lot, the Cal Callahan group that he put together. We hit it off immediately. He literally makes I'm like a real, I hardly even shower.
You're
like,
a man.
Yeah, no, I totally fucking am. Like, I seriously, like, dude, and the older I get, the more I become like that. Like, I cold shower or cold plunge. I hardly like a traditional like shower or never, we have a hot tub, a jump in the hot tub, and then skincare, I mean, easy, but like
I could have always described myself as the same way. The idea that I would develop a skincare company is like, to use the expression, is like wasn't on my bingo card.
Right. So Jared's company is Be Here Farms. He does a bunch of things, which we're going to get into, but these literally are the most extraordinary skincare products. It's the only stuff my wife and I use now, and the way he goes about his growing and processing is really, truly inspiring, and deeply kind of holistically and heart-oriented and a connection to the land. So let's start there, man. Like, we also have a lot of connections. Like, we were both in Northern California. We were both affected by fire. We had our kids at the same school, unknowingly at the same time, experiencing the same kind of shit show, albeit in different grades. So our lives ran tremendously parallel. Like when we first met, I was like, oh yeah, the Summerfield Waldorf. We're like, Summerfield Waldorf? Like, so all these things happened. So give us the kind of Genesis origin story of how Be Here Farms came into being and what brought you to Texas. And then we'll kind of move into the education piece and what you're doing with Edmund Knighton and your kind of inspired trips that you lead and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, I'll try to keep the background portion as short as possible because it in itself is like multiple really long, kind of interesting, dramatic stories. Like even those chapters, the chapters you were just talking about. But I say that I'm surprised that I am running a skincare company because when we started this, we were developing a hotel.
I would think you'd have a hair care company with the quality of your hair, which is amazing.
Well, listen, let's back up and look at your comment. I'm less interested in answering your question about my background than I am in your comment about you being a man, insinuating that men wouldn't use skincare. But the truth is that, like no skincare product is really something that I would recommend ahead of a completely holistic lifestyle. And so the idea that you're cold plunging and you have all these different practices for your health, that's skincare. Like your health, your skin is a reflection of your inner landscape. And so everything is connected and you can't eat junk food and play video games and put on our products and expect them to be magical. Right. You're going to have pimples and you're going to have weird red blotchy skin and dry patches and all that stuff. And so if you have that stuff, will an incredibly nourishing and whole food skincare product relieve inflammation and soothe you? Yeah, it will, but it's not the whole package.
Yeah.
So, and that's what we were developing. We were developing a hotel concept in California, in Sonoma, on the Sonoma-Napa border, that was more or less meant to, through the vehicle of a hospitality experience, let's call it a hotel. It's not really what we called it, but through that vehicle, we wanted to immerse people in a natural environment where they could disconnect from all the stresses of modern life, for starters. And once they're in that decompressed sort of space, introduce them to all sorts of things that were not only fun, comfortable, or enjoyable, things that you would want at a hospitality experience, like you're going on vacation, because there's plenty of places that sort of look into health and wellness and even agriculture, but they're more minimalist, or they're more sort of boot campy or prescriptive or regimented. And so that's obviously different than, say, a luxury hotel where you're supposed to, people expect you might go sit by the pool and do whatever you want and sign up for spa treatments, et cetera. And so we were looking to create a luxury hotel because the environment we were in was one of some of the best luxury hotels in the world, Napa. So we're surrounded by world-class hotels and restaurants, and we were looking to create a hospitality experience that met that objective standard. But subjectively, we were looking to bake into the entire process all of our sort of passions around holistic health, regenerative principles, and nature connection. And these are the things that were sort of most inspiring and transformative in my life, because there was a time when I was working on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, drinking heavily, doing recreational drugs, and staying up to all sorts of hours.
You're also a lot heavier too, right?
Yeah. Before that, there was a time when I was 250 or 60 pounds. And, thankfully at the time I was also a college athlete, believe it or not. Imagine I could have been 350 pounds.
What was your
probably.
sport?
I was a lacrosse goalie.
Ah.
So by the grace of being a goalie, which only has to take a few steps in either direction, you could actually kind of get away with like being overweight sometimes.
Well, you occupy more space in a way, so.
Yeah, but it turns out that the goalie would ideally be one of the more athletic people on the field at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So it's not always the case.
But a lot of the goalie is the first step explosiveness.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure everything's impacted by weight, but it'd be interesting to see like what the ratio is how much your reaction time would improve with the weight loss versus
like you're actually
amount of
taking up
space
a certain
that
amount of
you're taking
square
up.
feet. Yeah. Because it's hard to know the science on that, but certainly I wasn't at my healthiest, and basically that journey of learning how to take care of myself better is really the beginning of that hotel concept.
Did that happen simultaneous with your brother as well? His brother's Jason Pickard, who we've interviewed, who has a whole coaching and life coaching protocol, and is quite an inspiring and fascinating guy. But did that?
Yeah, it did. It was kind of sparked by it because Jason's
your older brother.
Yeah. And he was, so I was already kind of used to following in his footsteps in certain regards, like getting into the same sort of sports and hobbies that he had. I naturally sort of picked up on, but, maybe even including Wall Street, but that was also the path that our father had taken. So it's kind of like the family plan at that moment. He started working with a Czech practitioner trained by Paul Chek, the Czech Institute. And that's really where he and I both learned about some really basic things about how to take care of yourself, like how to eat, how to move, and how to be healthy, which is the name of Paul's, foundational book, How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy. And once we learned how to eat, move, and be healthy, I mean, it was a reversal of everything I had been used to. I was used to health and wellness being hard. And like a grind, like I was fat and I wanted to lose weight, so I had to eat the shittier food and like the low fat food and the margarine and the Diet Coke. Like none of it made sense, but that was sort of like the grind. And then as an adult, pretty much every day since I learned that information, and you make fun of me for it all the time, but like getting to know more about my food and the quality of it, and like
let's give a little backstory there. So I love this guy, and he's got an awesome sense of humor, and we connect on our humor. But I do the chefing at Men's Group. Jared is at least the second most involved in the kitchen, for sure the second most involved in the kitchen. And he and his wife and his daughter make like amazing ice cream. But for Jared, like the land and what he does, and I very much respect for this, but what's cool about him is that he can take a joke. He's a guy's guy as well. You were on sports teams. Like you can take the piss and give the piss. So his ingredients will have a whole story behind them. So he has chestnuts. He has chestnuts that have a great story behind them. The olive oil, whatever ingredient he brings in that week has a whole story. So I send him clips whenever he does this. I'll send the clips in from Portlandia, the great chicken guru episode. So it's kind of a running gag.
Listen, it's so funny. It'd be so funny if it was like, but it's also it's partially funny because it's true and because you love it. And what I mean by that is like the story of the ingredients, whether we're talking about my skincare products, which I could specifically be talking about because I very much feel this way about our products, or something that I'm eating, like the story is the thing.
It is.
The story is literally the thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're not interested in the story, there's a pretty good chance that your thing is industrial crap.
Right.
Full of toxins.
Right. And then also like what it says about your table and the coming together. Like when your ingredients have a story, like, look, there's the pretentious element and all that other kind of shit. And like people have like in LA, or maybe in Portland, like they can take that shit too far because they're living a very disconnected lifestyle. And the only time they're actually connected is when they go to a restaurant. So it seems a little insincere or phony, but at least they have that. But like, for us, like when you sit down at the table and like, oh my God, this ice cream's delicious. And then it has a story, like that's the essence of breaking bread. That's the essence of communion and it gives us some very interesting things to talk about, which then lead to stories and other personalities, like that great Italian woman who you spoke about, which was so inspiring.
Donatella.
Yeah.
She's one of the highlights of our Italy trip. So we take folks for a week every summer to Italy, and we live these types of practices while having a very good time. I mean, that's obviously, so basically the long story short of my deep backstory is that we spent 10 years developing that hotel. It sort of anti-climaxed in wildfires, which you were around for, and it burnt down the whole mountain and, thousands of acres in every direction. We were right in the center of it. And so this plan that we were developing for a third of my life at that point was overnight no longer possible. And so it was, the biggest pivot that I could ever imagine. In fact, it was unimaginable at the time.
Yeah.
And what we had developed at that time was this incredible farm and a really deep learning and relationship with the land itself, which also led to trails and roads being built and a lot of fire rehabilitation type work, watershed rehabilitation type work, things that actually led to us being awarded by this local conservation group something called the Watershed Visionary Award, which was like their, highest honor for this 100-acre restoration that we did surrounding where the hotel was going to be. A, because it was like the right thing to do, but B, because we were building structures there and we certainly didn't want them to burn down one day. And in the process of doing all of this, the whole place burned down. And that included like all of our equipment, our barns. We had developed a biodynamic farm at this point, which is one of the cores of that are these medicines, for lack of a better word, that you make called the biodynamic preparations. And you make them each year out of things that you grew or foraged in the wild and then compost underground usually. And that is at least a 1-year process and if not a multi-year process, because those things had to grow before you could use them, right? And they had to grow in soil, which you had to tend, right? So it's at least a multi-year process. And then when you make those medicines, you inoculate them back into the year before, kind of like they like reduce balsamic vinegar down for like 20 years and they keep sending it back into smaller and smaller barrels. So here you end up with this like compounding medicine of each year's vintage being inoculated into the last seasons up until that point.
So just give me some more specifics. Like, are you talking about soil amendments when you say medicines, or are you talking about
Yeah, it's like in lieu of organic fertilizers, organic pesticides, organic herbicides, organic fungicides. I can keep going on the sides. There's a side for everything. And that's sort of the organic model, because the organic model. Okay, so the first tricky thing is when you're using words like organic. Nowadays, what you mean by that is certified organic. And that is a list of things to do or not to do to get a seal from a governing body that's like completely checked out and has nothing to do with regenerative farming. And it's just like a checklist of things to do or not do, right?
It's been infiltrated and corrupted and marginalized.
Right. Yeah. So it's like, but that's what you mean when you say organic. So when you look at something on the grocery store shelf, it's not meeting the picture in your head, which is kind of like small, mom and pop, regenerative, clean, sustainable. That's what you picture. And so, but the truth is that it actually 99% of the time just means industrial organic. So like the lowest quality bar denominator for achieving the certification that you could imagine, sometimes from countries where they barely inspect these certifications. And I could tell you that my experiences with dealing with the organic certifiers in Sonoma County, which should be one of the best in the country because it's a very, agricultural place. There's ungodly amount of wineries. There's so much going on. So they should have some of the best organic certifiers in the country. My experience with them led me to dropping our organic certification within a year. I was like, this is insane. Our brand has far more integrity than this seal.
Yeah.
And so when you look at biodynamic farming, one of the things that most biodynamic farmers, if not all, would probably do is utilize these biodynamic preparations. And so they're things that are based out of like manure and sometimes quartz crystal, sometimes different flowers and herbs from the garden or from the wild. And each one sort of has its own specific method for being prepared and usually transformed, like through a composting or fermenting kind of type process. And then most of them get applied to the compost pile, actually. And then the compost pile is, the compost is what gets used in the garden. 3 of them technically. So, but the most common 2 that are spoken about are one that is like a manure base, and it's famously stuffed into cow horns and then buried in the ground.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one is a similar process, but it's with powderized quartz crystal. And
how long does it take a cow horn to decompose?
The cow horn doesn't decompose. And that's part of the point, actually, is that like the cow horn is like our fingernails. It's silica. And so it's also, it's like the growth pattern. The reasons why these things were selected in the first place is because across the plant, mineral, or animal kingdoms, there's similar formative processes, like similar growth patterns, like quartz crystal and like the silica in our body, and like the silica in horsetail plant, which is one of the plants that's used in these. And the layering of these like on top of each other, kind of the unification of the kingdoms, is one of the like really sort of potentizing, if that's a word, effects of this process, is sort of bringing together the same sort of movements and gestures and what they would call formative processes between different types of substances. That's part of, I guess, what you would call the alchemy of this situation.
And then the horn just causes like a slower release as well?
The horn is not really going anywhere. The horn can last like a super long time.
Yeah,
Eventually,
but the ingredients that are in it,
down.
as the ingredients that are in it kind of blend and break down, it just provides, I guess, the horn encapsulation is a slower release process.
Yeah, there's always sort of like a physical reason and then like an invisible reason.
Yeah.
And like the invisible reasons usually have to do with the shape of the horn, which like, shamans in different cultures will use the horn, or even like a shofar, right? There's like different, it's clearly an amplifying effect in the one direction, like a megaphone, and you could imagine it as like a sort of spiraling.
Shofar is a ram's horn that's blown in certain Jewish festivals, maybe other cultural festivals, but you could make a horn out of a ram's horn. The word is shofar.
But you could also picture like it going in towards the other way as more of like a spiraling kind of like condensing energy. And so the sort of the shape and the process in which the thing grows is its thing, that's what it's putting out there, even when it's taken off the cow. And so some of that symbolism will have to do with the animal itself. Like a cow is constantly in connection with the earth, all day long. It's chewing and ruminating. I mean, you might as well say meditating, but all day long it's chewing and ruminating. And so it's got this obvious connection with the earth, and its manure is so earthly. It's just it's like this like circuit of earthliness, And then the deer, which it's aspects of the deer are also used, or sometimes people will use elk or other sort of like antlered animals, but these antlers are looked at from like a symbolic standpoint, if nothing else, as like antenna for connecting with the periphery. And if you observe a deer, they're constantly like scanning the periphery. So they're a completely different type of nervous system than a cow, who like you could walk right up on and they're just like totally staring at the ground.
Right.
And so these different energetic qualities are a big part of why those items get selected to make the certain preparation. And you have to look at then the qualities of the plant itself and like its relationship to the ground and the things that it does in the world. Like like if dandelion, which is one of them, like it has extremely deep roots and it can access the silica in the deeper layers of the soil. And so once you kind of like pull on that thread in this worldview, you start saying things like dandelion is really good at communicating with silica. Like there's just one little word change from accessing silica to like communicating with silica. And so now dandelion is this thing that helps your garden communicate. And you start being able to look at things for the living process that's behind them. So it's less of a cabbage and more of a overlapping leafy orb.
So I want to like go back to the big picture with some of these granular aspects. So like when you came to the farm, were you like a little more of like a recovering Wall Street materialist that had this with the exposure to check, and were you always so kind of integrative in the way that you looked at life, or was your time developing the hotel like an explosion, an education on how integrated and connected the patterns of nature are?
It's like, yes, both. I started to taste that the second I started connecting with food and farming in the first place. Like, go eat organic food. Like, that was the advice, Well, I didn't even know what that meant. And then once you learn what that meant and you live it in New York City, you identify like one restaurant that's even talking about it. And now you're like, fuck, I got to learn how to cook.
Yeah.
And now you start cooking and you're like, wow, like organic ingredients are expensive. And then you're like, wait, look, what's this thing, CSA? What's this about? Oh my God, they send me a box of vegetables every week. And then you sign up for the CSA. And then you're like, what the fuck's kohlrabi? And then you got to look up a kohlrabi recipe.
Yeah.
And then you're like, what's a bok choy? And you got to look up a bok choy recipe. And so you're getting deeper and deeper into it.
Would you go to the Union Square Farmers Market sometimes?
I mean, certainly. Sometimes. Yeah.
That was always.
Yeah.
That kind of brought me into that whole world as a young man in 1993, 94, 95, going to the Union Square Farmers Market.
For me at this time, I was already bouncing out to Brooklyn. So I started in Manhattan and now I'm bouncing out to Brooklyn. And it's like 2007 and there's this explosion of farm-to-table food scene in Brooklyn. And seeing that is what led me to sort of start thinking like, gosh, like, well, what if this business was on the farm and the people from the city just drove like 45 minutes out of the city and like we're on some farm where they're having a world-class restaurant experience like that. I started thinking more like that. And then I got inspired by the Italian concept of agriturismos, which are farm-based inns, farm-based hotels, farm-based bed and breakfast, a lot of different
I worked on one of those
sizes and scales.
I worked in a Fattoria Collo Verde in outside of Lucca, in the hills outside of Lucca. I worked there on a farm like that for a couple of weeks. They would do the agricultura turismo combination.
Yeah, so that's ultimately one of the things that became like the main inspiration for Be Here as a hospitality experience was Italian agriturismo. So like, how do we have our version of that, which is basically city folk go to the country and experience a rural agricultural lifestyle with hospitality of the place. And so that was really where the project came in. But to answer your questions, like I was personally seeking, to understand myself and the world better. And you can call that spirituality, I think. And basically nature connection is where I found it. And so previously up to that point, I didn't have any connection to nature. I didn't have any connection to farming either, like at all. So sometimes in my early childhood, if I was like skiing somewhere, and I would stop, like I would like somehow separate from the group and I'd stop and there'd be like nobody else on the mountain and I just hear like the snow and I see the vista. Like I would have what I would describe as like an organic spiritual experience. That was kind of like my first access to nature connection, which is where I think my spirituality really lives. And so through biodynamic farming, like what biodynamic farming is a practice of agriculture inspired by a series of lectures by Rudolf Steiner. So then you got to wonder, well, who's Rudolf Steiner? And his teachings are really broad and deep. And not to pigeonhole them, but most people commonly call his body of work anthroposophy. And so I started getting to the point when once we were practicing biodynamics on our farm and actually making the preps, which some would argue is kind of like the cutting edge, not the cutting edge, like the leading edge. It's like the most involved you could be when biodynamic farming. Because many people, including myself presently, will purchase their preps from a prep maker, somebody who's fully devoted to making and offering these medicines to other farms. But like the original guidance was actually that you should make them within your own farm from materials that were from within your own boundaries. And that's like the idealized version of this. And so why was I talking about the preps? I just lost my train of thought for a sec.
Well, you were kind of going back to your whole evolution and education in the process.
Oh, you were asking about what if I was always thinking like this. And so once we started making the preps, we're like, now we feel like, yeah, now we're really doing it, you know? And I would get to the point where we wouldn't apply anything to the farm other than these preps that we were making. And so there was no organic fertilizers, which is extremely common in farming, organic fertilizer. Check any organic farm, they're using organic fertilizer.
Right.
And none of the organic sides that I was mentioning, which is, again, how these farms usually operate. And so when people would come to the farm and their eyes would roll back at the color or the vitality or the sort of structure and the cauliflower-ness of the cauliflower and the potato-ness of the potatoes, like so unbelievably, they'd never seen specimens like this.
Right.
And they weren't really buying into what they would consider like the more woo-woo aspects of biodynamics. I'd be like, well, what do you attribute this success to? Because we're applying no magic and nothing else besides water, sunshine, these biodynamic preps, sometimes maybe some alfalfa, maybe some seaweed emulsion, maybe some neem oil, handful of things that you can name, you know. All we're doing is the biodynamic practice. So once I realized that the practice was working so profoundly well is when I started to try to understand it better. Up until that point, I had sort of backed my way into it. So like I thought that biodynamics was interesting because it resulted in a high quality of food. So I had learned through my early days of learning about organics and trying to look at these farm-to-table restaurants and then trying to join the CSA and going out to Long Island and visiting the farms that the CSA sourced from, all that stuff. Once I started going through that, and then I saw some examples of biodynamics. And then when I had this opportunity to take on my first apprenticeship, leaving Wall Street and heading to Georgia, I took one on a biodynamic farm. And so all of these sort of things led me into biodynamics because I kind of thought it was like better than organic, which in a lot of ways it is. But I just kind of, that's all I knew about it. I just knew it was like organic plus, you know, organic but better. And then I literally owned and lived on a biodynamic farm for like 2 or 3 years, still feeling like that. Like we got the best, organic's the best, biodynamic, you know, we got a biodynamic farm. And then
where was that? Where was this?
This was in California, like 2012, 13, 14, somewhere around 13, 14, 15, I started studying with a lot more fervor the wider teachings of Steiner's work, which, you know, underlies biodynamics, underlies Waldorf education, underlies eurythmy and anthroposophical medicine and their style of architecture. And so if you can understand his wider teachings, those teachings are applicable to all these different applications of those teachings to practical fields like farming or medicine or education. And so it was a couple years after already starting to develop the land and working on this hotel project, already apprenticing on a biodynamic farm even, you know, I'd already been thinking I'm a biodynamic farmer. I own a biodynamic farm. I've hired a biodynamic farmer. We both think we're farming biodynamically. And then we start hiring some consultants and take some courses through some like really cutting edge biodynamic thinkers, and our whole world got opened up, you know, and that led to us making the preps, and that led to so many expansive discoveries. And ultimately, at the end of the day, I started this off by saying it's not, you know, when you ask me what's organic or when you use the word biodynamic, what you're talking about is the certification process today. Like ultimately, what I've been taught by so many, you know, of the greatest biodynamic teachers that I've encountered and sort of Steiner inspired people like Edmund, is that any time you organize it and prescribe it and, you know, make it into a certificate, it almost falls apart immediately. And what it is actually, it's like an inner process and it's unique with each person. And, you know, you can't make a checklist. Like the checklist for biodynamic farming says, like, are you using the preps? Like, are you using other chemicals? Do you have a certain amount of biodiversity? Did you do A, B, and C?
Right.
And it doesn't like, it can't possibly like use X-ray goggles into the person's heart and understand their spiritual relationship with the land.
Right.
Which
there
could be people all around the world who are farming in ultimately a way that Steiner would be like really excited about.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with biodynamics because they have such a living, intuitive relationship with their land.
Yeah. The land starts to speak to you when you're ultimately biodynamic farming at the highest level.
Yeah, really one of the things that it means is that like you treat the land like it's a living sentient being and you have an actual relationship with it. And so that's much more important than like how many quarter cups of biodynamic preparations did you apply on the field like this year.
Right. But you gotta learn to paint by numbers for a while before the land starts to really speak to you in that regard too. So that's honestly what it feels like. It feels like 10,000 years ago, you know, you wouldn't have needed these rules. But since we're so intellectual and so disconnected from this like living experience of what Mother Nature is, this great mystery of this dynamic rhythmic exchange of everything all interconnected. It's like absolutely bananas that we're here. That biodynamics and the steps and the rituals and the practices that go into creating a biodynamic farm is sort of like a modern day stepwise initiation process for getting you into that way of relating. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because we're so far away. We have to go through all these rituals of like, you know, fermenting and like to connect us with these rhythms and these seasons, which like right now, as we enter the winter solstice, there's freely available ways to connect with that rhythm all the time around us. And like, that is sort of what our brand is after really, is to help people connect with that rhythm, like the winter solstice being obviously a very particular node on the calendar year where you could say it's the darkest night of the year or the shortest daylight of the year. And that is factually true. But from the perspective of this is a living being and what is happening, and if you want, we can go into this, but just to keep it real short, there's what we would describe in Steiner's sort of language as the annual in-breath and out-breath of the earth. And right now being at the very, 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 very inward-most breath. Like if we were jumping on a trampoline up in the air and back down to the tramp, we're now at the bottom of the trampoline. And there's this like millisecond before we go back up, this like pause right at the bottom. And that's the winter solstice. And that's for much more important for a biodynamic farmer to be contemplating the meaning and feeling and experience of that than anything that the certification is asking them about.
So how did your education, so let's just kind of for the sake of time. So you're going through this tremendous education process of like learning about the land, learning about yourself, learning to connect with land, learning the biodynamic principles, how you then uniquely applying them to the land that you're on. Then you have this tremendous setback with the fires, or seeming setback with the fires. How did you, so take us through like a little bit about the fires and then how you hit the reset on your life, came to Texas and started the genesis for starting the skincare line. You're farming here in the skincare line.
There feels like a very sort of specific answer to that, which is that Paul Chek has a teaching which he calls the dream line. And so the dream line is tied to the things I was saying earlier about how to eat, move, and be healthy. Because eating and moving and being healthy are the tools or the guideposts, more or less, that you use to stay on your dream line. So it's related to the dream line, which is like your highest sort of goal for this stage of your life. You're the thing that really gets you out of bed in the morning. And in his language, it's the thing that provides enough levity in your life to get you over that everyday gravity of like the challenges of just being a human. So it's the thing that would push you to go the extra mile and really accomplish something great. And so my dream line was not to develop the world's best hotel. That was the marching orders on the ground. We thought we were doing that, but the dream line was to live in connection with nature and to share that with people. And so rather quickly, of course, there were a lot of feelings when the whole town burns down. Basically, not that town itself, but thousands and thousands of acres. We didn't live in a town, but when the whole neighborhood burns down.
What year was because there was a couple
2020.
Years. Oh, I was there for that fire.
Yeah. So when it all burns down, certainly there's a lot of feelings that come up. But within a period of days,
this was the bizarre lightning strikes that hit all over the area, the dry lightning that started this one off, right?
I never really got too caught up in the starts of the fires.
Yeah.
I don't really know the answer to that. But there were some major fires in 2017 and then again in 2020.
I was living there in 2020, and I can tell you, it was a dry, kind of hot August, I think, right?
Yeah, very windy, and we lived at a high elevation for the area.
Yeah, and there was just this completely bizarre dry lightning storm that was happening. And from where we lived, we could actually like see the horizon lighting up, and the lightning was so intense that we would see the buildings in San Francisco. We'd see the skyscrapers, which we never could usually see from where we live, but it was kind of wild.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh shit, this is going to be fucking crazy. And then there was just boom, fires just lit up. Because I was watching the dry lightning in kind of a southern direction from where I lived in Sebastopol, Santa Rosa border. But when we looked the horizon, which had mountains and the view was more obscured, there was this bizarre dry lightning storm happening all over the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, there were a lot of then practical things happening. We're now literally fleeing a fire. Yeah. We're now literally displaced. We're now literally trying to figure out how to process insurance claims on all of our blackened tractor, pieces of equipment. Because we weren't using that type of equipment in the farm really, but we did have some large equipment around for building and maintaining these mountain roads and trails and different things on the property. We had thousands and thousands of board feet of lumber that we had custom milled for a period of years. That was going to be like the furniture and the finishing touches of the hotel. So we had like 100-yard row of 30-foot tall stacked boards on top of each other for
redwood too,
like a football field.
Cedar, redwood.
Well, we weren't harvesting redwoods on our property. There was a lot of Douglas fir and oak and some maple.
These were billed from the trees on your property.
These were wind-fallen trees or trees that were harvested because for the health of the forest. Overgrown, dense areas that were what they would call thin.
Okay.
Yeah. And or if a road was being built or a variety of things come up with development. And so at any given moment, we tried to make the sort of most holistic choice we could make. Sometimes that would involve having a millwright come out to the property and a sawyer come out and mill these trees into planks and boards and chunks and different posts and beams and whatever was the highest, use of it. All that burnt down. So all those practical things come up, but sort of from the big picture, what ultimately happened was I didn't kill myself. And the dream was remembered pretty quickly. All of a sudden I was like, wait, my dream wasn't even to develop a hotel. That was a vehicle for my dream. So now my dream feels relevant to everybody else's hotels that already exist. Now my dream feels relevant to every corporation that wants to get in touch with the earth or experience wellness for their annual trip or something,
Right.
All of a sudden. So over time, the dream just found a new way to express itself in consensus reality, but the dream never really went anywhere. My dream is still to live in connection with nature and to share that with people. And so that's why basically all of our brand's offerings are the things you could have imagined being at that original hotel.
Right. But walk us through the genesis. So you got to shut down California, and then what brings you to Texas, and then what was the genesis behind the skincare, creating a skincare
Well,
line?
we had already had, so I'll start at the end there. We'd already developed the skincare products because once you have a farm, you got a farm's worth of stuff. And
Yeah.
you got to start doing something with it.
Right.
Otherwise, you're just growing food and letting it rot in the next pile. And so you start making pickles, you start making jams, you start making sauerkraut. That leads to a lot more experimentation, And so we started purposely experimenting as broadly as possible to see how can we come up with as much as we possibly can imagine for this hotel to be made of itself, so for all the in-room amenities and the spa products and the food and beverage program and the souvenirs and the little treats during the day and the turn down things on their pillow.
Right.
How can we possibly add time and layers and story to all of those different things to intensify the situation?
Right.
And so that led to us starting a membership program. So this is the year before the fire, the year of the fires, technically, and the year of COVID. We started a membership club, which was basically a grassroots marketing effort where I identified the 50 or 75 families in the area that I thought would make a lot of sense for them to know about our project. And I would really like to collaborate with them in the future. They owned other world-class hotels, wineries, restaurants, or philanthropists, different people who I had known about in the community.
Right.
And so I invited just them, individual, they got literal invitations. And I think 15 or 20 of those families joined. And it was a 24-week membership, which ended 2 or 3 weeks early because of the fires. But for those first 20 weeks of the last year we were living on that California property, we gave them this cornucopia of fruits and vegetables and flowers and herbs every week, but also one experimental product that we were developing. And so through that year, we developed these 20 products, which 7 or 8 of them, almost all of our signature products presently were developed during that membership program.
Oh, wow.
And so I started selling them at farmers markets that year. And one other sort of important thing when it kind of became a little bit more real was when Scott Lindy, who's the founder of Sun Potion, when he and I met and he came to the garden.
Which, by the way, Scott Lindy, cut to 2002, 2003, 2004 in Los Angeles, was one of my most fervent yoga students.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he took my yoga class all the time at the Hollywood Y, and then
that's so funny.
Yeah, we became friends, and I think I got him into mountain biking and so forth.
Wow, that's really funny.
Yeah, we got a lot of crazy
we're
connections.
Close present day.
I remember when he started that business, he was kind of this little bit lost doing real estate and other stuff, and he's and then I remember he brought in dehydrated ant powder. And before yoga class, he gave everybody some ant powder. And he's like, I think I'm going to start this kind of supplement line and so forth. Ashwagandha was just hardly a whisper until so crazy small world connection.
Yeah, so he saw our products that I had been developing for this membership club, had been selling at the farmer's market. He thought I was kind of crazy for not selling them more widely and just selling them to the 20 people that I had curated into this community. And he pretty much insisted that I sell them on his website.
Sun Potion.
Yeah. And so we launched, for the first time ever, the Summer Solstice Serum, which is our flagship product. We launched it on sunpotion.com.
Yeah, I'm wearing it right now.
Which is interesting because they don't sell other people's products.
No.
They have a huge catalog of their own products, and then they started selling ours. And if you go there today, they actually sell our whole collection. So if you click onto the skincare on their website, it's mostly our collection.
Yeah. You got me back in touch when we realized this at Men's Group one night. We had the Scott Lind connection. I'll buy this, by the way.
Okay, yeah, I brought them for you. So yeah,
that's nice.
I brought that in particular because I thought you're such a man that there's really no this is great content, right? There's no really super duper manly way to apply that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you just kind of get in there a little bit. Yeah. But I do, I'm huge on essential oils and, I love all that shit and everything else.
Yeah, so but I'm just going to
So Scott Lindy, so you connect with him and he's so he gives you the first foray into online retail.
He told me to sell these, sell these to the public.
Dude, that is great.
And I
I almost want to eat that.
Yeah, I know. It's technically very edible.
Yeah, it's edible, yeah.
Yeah. And so the punchline to this story, which we maybe, I don't know if we're getting near the end of this episode.
No,
or not,
we got 35 more minutes for sure.
So an interesting place to go for a second is that this is where the fires and Sun Potion and us becoming a skincare company all comes together. Because Scott visits the farm, tells me we should sell them on his website, says let's launch them October.
Pre-fire or post-fire?
Pre-fire.
Okay, he comes to the farm pre-fire.
Yeah, like September 10th, let's say. Something like that.
Right.
It's now, and we agree, we're going to launch them in October, mid-October.
Right.
Okay, it's now September 27th, the day of the fires.
That's right. Yeah.
It's now the morning of the fires.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't know they're happening. The girls go out to the ocean to get fresh air because smoke from neighboring towns over has reached our elevation. And it was like really hard to breathe at home. And so they went out to the Sonoma coast just to spend the day. Our daughter was 5 at the time, so we just didn't want her breathing the smoke all the time.
Right.
And I stayed home to write, for the first time ever, website copy, product description, all sorts of stuff for the Summer Solstice Serum, which is going to launch on sunpotion.com. I have this, I don't know if a panic attack is the right word, maybe more like a premonition, but I have this overwhelming feeling that it's September 27th, and for the last 5 years in October, we've been evacuated. And if we were to get evacuated and I don't have the ingredients for the Summer Solstice Serum, we wouldn't be able to meet the deadline for Sun Potion. And it was no small feat because I'd only made like 30 or 50 of them ever at that point, and they wanted 400 of them. We had never blended more than probably a handful at a time. So we were going to blend 400 of them for the first time ever and ship them for the first time ever to Sun Potion. And I didn't want to mess up.
Just so people and the listeners understand, like you grow these herbs, you extract them by the 3 days of the moonlight. Like this is no simple task. Like this isn't like, you're not like you bought an emulsifier. Like you were.
No. We were the incredible thing we had done at that point was developed a biodynamic farm, which was producing quality ingredients that you could then do what we do next, which is honestly as little as possible. Like what do the best chefs do? They get the world's best ingredients and they get out of the way.
Yeah.
And so like our whole process is to grow and source the world's best ingredients, the most vital, cleanest ingredients, usually through biodynamic practices or from wild sourcing. We then process them as hands-off, as minimally as possible. So the core of our collection, and then we'll come back to this fire story.
Yeah.
The core, I just wanted to put a pin in it for a second. The core of our process is our oils, which become the Summer Solstice Serum, our other signature serums, but they also become the botanical tallow and the Honey Kiss lip treatment, which are the 2 other products sitting next to you, and they become in our wet mask. So the oils are really the start and the core of our collection. And we take the flowers or the herbs or the roots from the garden or from the wild. We place them into usually biodynamic olive oil, sometimes sweet almond oil. And then we infuse them in the sunlight and the moonlight for up to 1 moon cycle, but sometimes just a couple weeks. And it's a human process of observation. I determine when they're done based on my inner sense and my vision. And basically, the pulsing rhythm of daytime and nighttime simply occurring is the only force that is ever applied to the serum. There's no artificial heat or pressure, which is how these products are usually made, like on a stove, for example, or under some sort of like, high pressure sound waves.
Beautiful.
And so, that's the most gentle extraction method. It's the oldest, extraction method.
Yeah.
And if the old way is still the best, then, it's still the cutting edge. So these are ancient methods that are still cutting edge, and it's the fullest, gentlest, most extraction process. The other ways,
they just feel extraordinary too, like their absorption. And, sometimes when you put like coconut oil on and so forth, you have to have wet skin and let it like wet, dry. It just doesn't matter. It just absorbs so well, and it feels so like nourishing and nice.
Yeah.
Great products.
Your skin knows just what to do with it.
Yeah.
And it's got only things in it that are exceptionally good for you, and it's got literally nothing that's not good for you.
So I'm building to this like this emotional, for lack of a better term, like panic attack, because if a fire hits, if something goes wrong, there's not like, oh, I can go order these through Mountain Rose or anything like that. Like it's it's a whole 0 point and you got to start all over again.
Well, when this happened, that is what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll finish the story. So I'm sitting there panicking, thinking, what if we get evacuated? I'll miss the Sun Potion launch. Then it'll be Black Friday. It'll be Christmas. I'll never get on their website. I got to get these oils mobile. I knew that. I knew I had to get the oils onto wheels so that if we were evacuated, I could bring them with me. And so we had 2 options for that. One is our farm van, which is off-site at the time because it was making deliveries to our members. And 2 was this RV that I had borrowed from my father during COVID times because he was out of the country. And I went to Idaho, borrowed his IV, and we had it to do road trips during COVID times. It was not a utility vehicle, okay? It was a high-end recreational vehicle.
Right.
Like a Mercedes Sprinter.
Right.
With like a nice bed inside and like leather and whatever, fake wood, walnut and all that stuff. Not a place to put hundreds of pounds of deeply colored oils in glass jars, right? Okay, so it was the only option I had. And I was overwhelmed with this compulsion to put the oils into the RV.
This is just intuitively hitting you. Like there's no siren call, no warnings, no radio.
There's no fire within miles and miles as the crow flies.
Yes.
Many, many miles. A couple towns over, there's a fire, which is why we had smoke, but there's no fire anywhere near us.
Right.
A fire a couple towns over is not a threat of safety. You know what I mean? Just smoke. I go outside and spend probably 3.5 hours with a respirator on. The air quality was in the 200s on like the AQI, whatever the little meters.
Danger zone.
Yeah, it was like purple. It was like Beijing. And I put on a respirator and I spent 3 hours loading up these oils into wooden crates and stacking them in the back of our family RV, thinking that in a day or 2, we would transfer them to the van.
Yeah.
And it would be all good, but I just knew they had to be mobile. And I couldn't fucking rest if they weren't mobile. And I can't explain it because I had hours of website writing to do inside, and that's why I didn't go with my family to the coast. I was there to write the website stuff. I come inside, it's now like 5 p.m. I feel weird about packing a go bag for the entire farm without even having one for myself. So I pack myself a go bag, I pack my daughter a go bag. My wife and daughter come back from the coast. I tell my wife about the weird day I had, and I actually tell her that I'm not going to really feel whole unless she packs a go bag. She starts packing a go bag. We get a call. The mountain's on fire. There's fire in every direction. Get off the fucking mountain right now. We were gone within 5 minutes. The sky was red. There's fire on both sides of the road. Every direction we try to turn off the mountain, fire everywhere. The whole place burns down. Meanwhile,
you're driving with visual fire as you're leaving.
Visual fire.
Yeah, terrifying.
In every direction.
Yeah, with a 5-year-old.
It wasn't like where we were. It wasn't like the 100-foot. Like we got to other parts where we had to stop and turn around because there were roadblocks, and you would look like a couple 100 yards past the roadblock, and you'd see what would look like a 200-foot tall wall of fire. You're just like a endless, like so wide and tall, but really what it was this whole. You were looking at a whole mountain that's on fire, but it's like. In the middle of the night, especially like at this point, it's like midnight or whatever. It was getting late, I think, by the time because we were driving so slowly and then there were so many roadblocks. I think it took hours to get to San Francisco, which is where we ended up that night. And it could have been like a 75 to 90 minute thing. So I think like we had to drive up and over far ways around all these huge fires that were just everywhere. And meanwhile, my wife and daughter are in the car in front of me, and I'm in the RV, and all I hear is clang, 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 ding, tong, da, da, cluck, 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 cluck. All these glass jars behind me, like singing this song. And it was like I was Noah's Ark, you know? I had 2 of every oil, and I knew that I was getting out of this flood and that these oils were going to repopulate like my earth, like my life. I knew it. I was just like, these serums are going to So we drove down to San Francisco. We bottled those 400 units in a extra space that the hotel let us use. We kept driving down the coast to Santa Barbara, and instead of shipping them, I delivered them in the RV. And we stayed down there in Southern California for a period of time, tried to like figure out our lives. We then ended up bouncing around quite a bit, but once we determined that we were not gonna, like for a while we were trying to figure out, well, how can we kind of like rehabilitate and save that property and still live there? Because we were just so in love with that land. we thought we'd live there forever. We thought our grandkids would die there. Like, it was a multi-generational vision on that land. My dad was building a house on the land too. He didn't actually, but like that was the vision. And so once we realized that we weren't going to be on that land, and this was now post-COVID times, which was, not a friendly place to be. So we immediately were no longer attached to that place.
Yeah.
Like, we had already been being pushed out. Like, we were already a homeschool family in California, knowing that, we would not be probably back in any sort of school system in that state. And so, like, we'd already made a lot of sort of decisions that embedded us further in staying there, and we were okay with it. But once the fires came and the hotel vision was like not really possible, we were out. And, there were a lot of places we thought about going. Ultimately, we wanted to stay in the States. And within the States, there's, handfuls of places that we considered. And really, at the time in particular, I would say health freedom was a pretty big motivator. And, what that state's sort of current response was to the situation was like a pretty big motivator.
Right.
And then when you cross-reference those by places that get cold, because my wife's Puerto Rican, like, all of a sudden Wyoming's out, Montana's out. Like, there's certain places that you wouldn't be wise to bring a Puerto Rican wife. And so, here we are. We also have some family down here who's been here for a couple decades, and we had a lot of friends who were already starting to move here, and I just had a sense that the community, and that's ultimately like the first, most noticeable, like, favorite thing about moving to Texas has been the people. Not just like the people who've been here forever, but also the people who flooded here over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And the turnaround of this like whole dream thing kind of, especially to tie a bow on it as it relates to you and I was still, when I moved here, we've now been displaced. It was January of 2020. So we were displaced for like a year and a half. We decided on not going back there and going somewhere else. We decided on here, and we rented a place like online, sight unseen, just to kind of move to quote unquote Austin, knowing that then we were going to sort of scour the region and find out where's the place that we want to live. We figured hill country west of Austin, which is where we are now. We're in Wimberley. And so it took us a year or two to find the place that we now settled. And so now we feel, as of 2022, so as of like 2024, I guess we've been in the house and the homestead that we're in now, where we've started our garden again, and it's where spending all of my time. The 2020 to 2024, even though we did end up in Texas, it was quite a period of displacement in an uncertain way. When you go from having a 300-acre home that you're developing roads and trails on, and have dozens of named trees and rocks and lions and figures that you're interacting with, and your daughter is born there at home, and your father is building a house there, and you're coming up with plans that are going to impact like 100 to 200 years of your family history, and this is all going through your head when you're making these decisions. It's quite shocking to all of a sudden not have any land and to be in a rental in like suburbia in Austin. And obviously, I was very blessed to be able to find myself in those ways. A lot of people lost their homes and had no recourse on what to do next. You know what I mean? So in so many ways, I was so blessed and safe and protected. And also, it was a tremendous change from my environment and my situation. And so I was working through all of that. And about 6 months after living here, so I'm still in that rental house, and I was feeling like pretty cloudy, I would say, about the direction of how, like, I started selling the serum, but you got to sell a lot of those serums for them to add up to like the kind of revenue a hotel's going to generate. So it's like, I was trying to figure out, what am I going to do here? And I had known Eben Britton already as a friend, and he was in town doing a book reading for his book, The Ebb and Flow, at this like South by Southwest kind of pop-up thing that happened. And so I just went to go support him and see him in person, because he was in town from LA at the moment. He wasn't living here like he does now. And the gentleman from Sun Life, Khalil, was the interviewer of that. And so Cal, our mutual buddy Cal, was there to, I guess, support Khalil, and maybe he had known of or wanted to know Ebb.
Yeah.
And so there was not that many people there, and that's actually where I met Cal for the first time. So there's like 10 or 20 people sitting in this small little space waiting for these guys to come on, and I introduced myself to him and asked him if he wanted to hang out. Basically, I was like, hey, we have a lot of mutual friends online, which is true. I had been seeing him online before we moved to Texas because of our mutual friends and like the algorithm. They were all going over to his house to work out on Wednesday. So I kind of had a sense of like, oh, I remember that guy. And so I just introduced myself. Hey, I'm new here. He's like, let's hang out. And pretty shortly after that, he actually hired me as a consultant because he had a project going on where a lot of the things that I had just sort of come off of in developing my own sort of land and hospitality project felt really transferable and relevant to him. And so meeting Cal and sort of then joining the men's group and the sort of social aspects of that, but also the professional aspects of him seeing value in me and my experience. Because like, the idea that whole 10 years was like burnt down and is a waste was, of course, like a fear of mine.
Yeah.
It's like, what if none of this ever,
right?
Like, it's just all like, because most of the things we did during that time either literally burnt down or were only ever on paper, like 100 stacks thick of architectural drawings that you paid ungodly amounts of time and money on, which never got built because they're only for that one piece of property.
Right.
Even if we bought 300 acres somewhere else, you're not going to build them there. They were for that space. So the fear of all of that, vaporizing got quieted, I would say, when I met Cal and he saw value in me right out the gate. And he himself is a very smart, successful guy. And for him to, and he has, not to age him, but I'm certainly younger than him. And so for somebody who is senior me in certain ways and coming to me for that guidance made me feel like, all right, this is all going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so I think that the end to your question of kind of like, how did I pivot? Certain aspects of it were because of my dream line. And I think that's the most important thing for a person to have is to identify their dream. And if they can't, they might be in a nightmare. And that's also important to recognize. And the practice for both is the same. It's the how to eat, move, and be healthy, really basic lifestyle principles that kind of help you feel grounded and centered and functioning at the best you can. That dreamline concept plus accepting the situation as it was. Like when I was feeling that cloudiness, and kind of the day before I met Cal, I was expressing that cloudiness to my brother, who, like you said, is a very talented coach and therapist. And he said, well, why don't you like investigate that cloud? Like, why don't you just, what does the cloudiness have to offer you? Like, don't resist it. What's so bad about cloudiness? I spent one day accepting the cloudiness. Like I took a bath, I read a book, I went for a really slow walk in the woods, and I just consciously chose to sort of like think about and accept the benefits of and what's the possible gift of the cloudiness. And I met Cal the next day. It was literally one day of accepting my situation, and the cloudiness just moved on like clouds do.
Yeah.
And, I think that's pretty natural. Like these emotions should kind of like pass through us and come and go. And so like when they get bottled up like that, we'll go to my brother or somebody and kind of bounce it off them. But one day, it had resolved itself.
Yeah. Cal has this extraordinary ability to kind of like just fill that vacuum. And he's not even really conscious of it. He just fills that vacuum in a really spectacular way. I have a short and funny story that illuminates the same thing. So I have a Brain Supreme customer who is just going through it. His adult child was injured and is getting this rigor mortis disease that Celine Dion has. So he's like a Texas working man. I mean, he might be just early 60s, but like it's foreman type 60s. Like, he's been, long days grinding, not unhealthy, but not a specimen of health. Wife is kind of working class. And then they have this son who's just freezing up. Like this adult son had to move into him. And each day the body just locks up more and more. So the emotional stress of that, the financial stress of that, and then the wife gets let go, and Brain Supreme's really helping them. And so I say to him, he lets me know, he's like, oh, we can only afford 1 pack this week. And I'm like, hey, look, don't worry about it. I just this is what the product costs me. Just pay that. And he's like, so we were doing that for a little bit. And then he's like, hey, I can only afford 1 pack this week but this time. And I'm like, just come to my mailbox, make the pickup. It's all going to be fine. And so he comes to the mailbox, and I put a bunch of Brain Supreme in there for him. It's like, for him. And I'm like, he calls me and he's like tearing up, and I want him to save face a little bit. So I'm like, don't worry. I'm just going to charge some rich asshole more later. Okay. And literally, Cal Callahan buys a lot of Brain Supreme products. He's a really big supporter. And I always give him a discount, but he just pays full price anyhow. So literally 30 seconds after I say this line, so this old timer can save face, that I'm just going to charge some rich asshole more, Cal Callahan calls. Cal Callahan's Zelle payment comes through where he pays like 1/3 more than he should have, which paid for all this guy's product as well, too. So I told Cal, like, you're definitely my favorite rich asshole. You're a magical rich asshole. And it worked out. It was that quick. It literally was, I did this gesture for this guy. It was just like you had this cloudy day, then you meet Cal. I do this kind gesture for the guy. I say to him, don't worry, some rich asshole is going to come through. And then right there, like literally the Zelle went ding, and there was the payment.
I mean, I could think of more flattering ways to describe Cal.
Yes, for sure.
I appreciate the I appreciate the sentiment.
So,
we'll have to excerpt this special section for Cal.
Yeah. Well, I called him right after that happened, and he like teared up. He thought it was because he likes to take the piss too. Yeah. Yeah. That it just kind of worked out that way and everything. So, how did you find? So you knew you wanted so you were here, and during this cloudy period, then you meet Cal. You pick up the consulting. You pick up the consulting gig, but you knew you wanted to be back on land and farming again. And bring this.
That was the only thing that mattered.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't even really call it farming anymore. It was farming when I had a team of people doing it for me. Now it feels like gardening.
Oh, okay.
But
are you entirely a one person operation, or you have
in the garden at our home? I mean, certainly the family gets involved.
Yeah, your wife and daughter
occasion,
are involved.
And like sometimes I have to. Sometimes a friend will come help, but like in a really meaningful way. If somebody comes helps you in the garden for 4 or 5 hours, it's really significant. You can get a lot done, especially when you're normally just out there tooling around by yourself. But I am out there in our Texas garden by myself, and we have one gentleman in California. That property still exists. It's long-term being sold, but short-term is still being cared for. And
so some herbs are grown out there.
Okay, great. Yep. A really large percentage of our herbs and flowers now come from both properties. And ultimately would end up just coming probably from only the Texas property. So that's sort of like a multi-year transition that's happening.
How long did it take you to adjust it to gardening in Texas? Harder environment, right?
Well, I'll just be totally honest, because when we were in California, I wasn't doing most of the gardening. So I was managing a farm director.
Yeah, you had the vision.
I had a tremendous vision that had me managing over like 150 people, basically, if you count the different design teams, and these people weren't under my employer or anything like that, but like there were probably 50 people at Sonoma County alone who were like reviewing and interacting with our project, and inspecting different aspects of it. And there were 17 employees of Be Here who were ranging from foresters to farmers to carpenters to an entire construction company, project manager, superintendent, office assistants, engineers, like over 100 years of construction experience. I was managing as like a 28-year-old, developing the world's best hotel for my first project ever as an owner builder.
Nice.
So yeah, it was pretty big vision.
Yeah.
But you don't know what you don't know.
Right. And so now we've got like 10 minutes left. It's all starting to come together for you. I'm going to paraphrase from what I know, and then you kind of just dive into it more. But you're really starting to, all the wisdom, the expertise that you've accrued, the relationships, the mentorship, it's all starting to come together with this kind of educational, almost like spiritually charged, gastronomical adventures that you put together. And then you now you're also brought on Edmund, who was a teacher that you met at Waldorf Inspire, who's been on the show. So you bring him together and you have kind of an educational online component. So like how you just kind of walk us through like how you're folding it all together and what the new kind of iteration and expanded like Be Here vision is going to encompass.
Yeah, I mean, it's just all organically has developed on its own, but the three sort of spheres that people interact with us most on, except for maybe consulting and, advising on their own businesses that are unrelated to us. But we obviously make and offer these skincare products through very unique processes that we did dabble in a little bit today, but you could have an entire episode talking about how skincare products are normally made and why these are so different. But there's some really pretty good information on our website, including a couple-minute video about the oil infusion process that I was talking about earlier. And every single ingredient that's in any of our products, we describe whether we grow it, and if not, where it came from and how it was grown. So that's every ingredient in our entire collection. So there's a lot of information on there. Those are our skincare products. And then the in-person and the online programming, you would just want to sign up for our email list and Instagram really, so you can keep your thumb on the pulse of that stuff. But basically every February we offer this program now called Being Human. And Edmund Knighton is my co-host and also sort of like the main teacher in a way. And I created the program so I could sit with Edmund more, if I'm being totally honest.
Yeah.
And then we bring in...
Edmund is one of the foremost scholars of Steiner and the Ra law of one. He's also a PhD in psychology.
Yeah, neuropsychology.
He's a brilliant guy.
He would likely not describe himself as a scholar or any of those things probably, but it's pretty accurate. And so Edmund and I also welcome in 12, we call them visiting masters. They're guest speakers, but we call them visiting masters because the program is all about self-mastery. And so we call it spiritual growth. We call it community-supported spiritual growth, actually, because at the end of the day, this community, this group environment that we create, hands down, I mean, I didn't even know it when we started it, but hands down, the most vital and incredible part is the relationships between the group members themselves. At the end of the program, at least the first time we did it in particular, like half the group did not want it to end. And so we started this second program, which we don't promote publicly, but for alumni of Being Human, or for anyone who comes to our in-person events, the week-long events, we invite you in as alumni to this program we call the Inner Circle. And so first of all, they get discounts on our skincare collection and they know about everything that's going on with us before anyone else does, because I'm talking to them all the time. But also Edmund and I sit with them twice a month for the Inner Circle sessions. And these are, each year we take on one sort of spiritual text that feels a little bit too big to just kind of casually take on your own. Like this year we did the raw material, the Law of One. Last year we did Rudolf Steiner's Calendar of the Soul. Next year we haven't selected it yet. But basically each year after Being Human ends, we start up the Inner Circle and we take it all the way through till the winter solstice, which is next week. And so at the time of the recording, I don't know when this comes out, but it'll be coming out pretty soon.
We're going to get it before February. So this will come out like first week of January. Probably.
Yeah. So we just passed the winter solstice by the time this has come out, and we're about to start Being Human. So if you happen to be listening to this and you're interested,
the Edmund one's going to be up where we dove into that quite a bit.
Yeah. Great. So that's the online stuff. And then the in-person stuff we host often in the summer, but you just got to stay in touch with us, because anytime we have an opportunity to take a group out into connect with nature and themselves and have a really good time with, I would say the thing that separates our in-person programming from the general marketplace of retreat type programming would be maybe the level of curation.
Yeah.
I'm obsessive about curation and sourcing and quality. And I've been studying the world's best hotels and restaurants since I was a child. And for the last 15 years, I've been much more specifically studying it.
Yeah.
Including like going and apprenticing at one of America's best hotels for a full year.
Oh, yeah? Where'd you do that?
Blackberry Farm.
Oh.
In the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee.
Oh, wow.
And the gentleman there, Sam Bell, is, in my opinion, one of the most interesting and creative hoteliers that I've ever heard of. And at the time, he passed away in a very unfortunate, you could say like freak accident. And way too young, like approximately like my age now.
Oh, geez.
And so I told him about the Be Here concept of the agriturismo, the inspirations, what I wanted to do. And I approached him and basically offered to work there for free for a full year. And Velisa too. So I my wife. And so I pitched the two of us as a team that would leave our jobs for Deutsche Inc. in her case, and for me, I had already left the stock exchange and was farming at this point, but that we would come work full time as long as we could shadow the executives in every department and work on the front lines as well in every department. And we divided and conquered the 30 departments that they had. So Velisa worked in concierge and human resources and accounting and on and on, I'm not remembering. And I worked as a breakfast cook and a bartender and a farmer and a butcher and a housekeeper and a security guy and so many others that I'm not remembering right now. And so we spent a year doing that, as well as I sat in on every meeting. Sam, the proprietor, he's the son of the founders, but he should be given credit for it going from like a beautiful country inn type place with really warm Appalachian hospitality into when a week after he accepted me to come, after I pitched him on that idea and he said, yes, you can come do that. They were named by Travel and Leisure as the #1 resort in North America and the #1 resort in the world for service.
Whoa.
And so they were in a completely oversold. So like he said yes to me. A week later, those two awards come out and they were 110% like oversold for the entire year we were there. And they were in like their biggest sort of pop growth moment. Wow. And so it was almost just tailor made for our learning.
Wow.
And so all of those things add up to, I would say, a level of curation and service at our events that's not really what you might expect from like a health and wellness retreat.
Yeah. And after, I think I'm going on knowing you 2 years now, I would agree with all of that about your personality and how thoughtful and meticulous and kind of layered your thinking is.
It's my favorite thing. I only have one speed. When I'm talking about like curating an experience for someone, like we were joking about at the beginning, like the story is the whole thing. I don't know how else to do it. Like what else makes something interesting? Everything is so homogenized and commodified out there. It's like the story is the thing.
Yeah. I
say it all the time. Our products are our process. If you want to know about our products, I have to tell you about our process because there's really nothing else that differentiates them. You could look at two products and be like, oh, chamomile, calendula, like same old bullshit. It's not. It's a horse of a different color.
Yeah.
Because of the process, the manner in which they were created.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. We that's our philosophy of Brain Supreme too. Like what we put into our mushroom grows with the biogeometry and the air purification systems, crystals, like throw everything at it. So yeah. All right, well, this has been great. I know you got to go. Thank you so much. So can we do a little Brain Supreme discount for Brain Supreme users to try your products and everything like that?
Yeah, especially because I was just hesitated for a moment because we have some great opportunities going on right now because it's the holidays. But by the time this comes out, we'll just make sure that code Brain Supreme is live for something special.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah,
as
whether
well.
it's a discount or a special gift, we'll come
Yeah.
up with something special to encourage you to check us out. I'd love to connect with you people.
Yeah, cool. All right, my man. Thanks, Jared. That was great.
You got it, boss.
All right, bro.